Part 55. A Middle School Cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 543. Ever since Takahashi Makoto and Nizuma Eiji proposed such a weird winning and losing condition, the yellow-haired glasses man, who is the plot builder of the good friend group of Yashiro Mumanjai, has been thinking about how to create and shape a teacher character that can conquer other cartoonists and satisfy himself. While the yellow-haired glasses man was still thinking hard, the silver-haired guy Fukuda took the lead. After observing the latest episode of JoJo with his good friend, the yellow-haired glasses man, as the representative of wisdom in Yashiro Mumanjai, naturally saw more things about the choice of the silver-haired guy. Whether he was unwilling to admit defeat or tried his best to respond to the silver-haired guy's move, although the good friend had vowed before, when he really did it, the yellow-haired glasses man found that the difficulty of the problem he was about to face was far beyond his imagination. "Are you still awake, Kei?" who has always been jokingly called a violent girl by Makoto Takahashi, rubbed her eyes in her pajamas, watching her husband still bent over the desk and writing furiously. She couldn't help but feel a little worried. After standing for a long time, she finally couldn't help but speak. Kei-chan. "Sorry, did I disturb you?" Looking back and seeing his wife with sleepy eyes, the yellow-haired man with glasses immediately put down the pen in his hand and scratched his head apologetically, "Because I suddenly have some ideas, so, Kei-chan, you should rest first. Do you need coffee, Akito-kun?" I have to emphasize that although she has always been jokingly called a violent girl by Makoto Takahashi, I have to say that Kei is a good woman, at least when a certain yellow-haired man is busy. She is not as willful and coquettish as some idiot women, but fulfills her duties as a wife conscientiously. By the way, Rina, who was called a witch by a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, is often like Keiya, so the saying that behind every successful man there is always a woman silently supporting him makes sense. Coffee. The yellow-haired man with glasses took off his glasses, gently rubbed his tired and dry eyes, took a deep breath, turned around and smiled at his wife. "Thank you, Keiya-chan. Let's not talk about the various mushy thanks and various affectionate confessions of the violent woman after she served the coffee." After successfully comforting his wife and letting her rest with a satisfied and shy smile, the yellow-haired man with glasses, who was originally full of smiles, became serious in an instant when he thought of the comics. In this comic artist's big brawl, compared with the silver-haired brother Fukuda's JoJo, the comic Hikaru no Go by Aki Mumuha has a great advantage, that is, in the comic Hikaru no Go, the character named Sai has been defined as the role of teacher since his debut. At first, the yellow-haired glasses man who thought he had the upper hand recalled the content of the comic JoJo that he and his best friend had observed before, and his expression became solemn. To be honest, after reading the latest chapter of the comic JoJo, although I was able to calmly analyze and explain various information to my best friend at that time, and by the way, I made the legendary declaration of victory with great confidence, which boosted the morale of my best friend, but in fact, after reading the content of that chapter of the comic, the degree of surprise in the heart of the yellow-haired glasses man was far greater than that of his best friend Landai. According to the victory and defeat conditions proposed by Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nizuma before, the key point is the role of teacher in the comic. Although I don't know how other people on the cartoonist side will create, if I want to show the charm of a character, the best way is naturally to enrich the character's personality through various plots, and implant the charm of the character from existence to non-existence, from shallow to deep into the concept of every reader through a series of events. Like many popular characters in comics, from the beginning of his debut, he gradually showed the characteristics of this popular character through a series of events in the comic plot, and gradually shaped the image of that character among readers, creating the charming legend story of that character. But, the latest episode of the comic JoJo by the silver-haired brother Fukuda did not follow this common sense, but chose a more alternative method. Whether it is telling Xiao Xiao about the stone mask or teaching Xiao Xiao Ripple Kigong, Although from the previous serialized content, the words and deeds of the Uncle Wole Shepeli are quite frivolous, but this does not affect the powerful impression that this uncle gradually formed among readers. Whether it is killing the vampire who attacked Chiao Chiao before, or the strength shown by the occasional glimpse when teaching Chiao Chiao Ripple Kagong, the Uncle Wole Shepeli can definitely be called brave. Knowing clearly that he would die if he participated in the hunt for the stone-faced vampire, knowing clearly that saving Jojo would lead to his own death, knowing clearly that he would die in this place, this uncle named Wole Shepli did not escape his fate, nor did he fear death. Instead, he mustered up the courage to face it, perhaps compared to the villain Dio and Jojo, who has the halo of the protagonist. Uncle Wole Shepli's strength is not worth mentioning, but his courage to face death is undoubtedly worthy of praise. Even before his death, Uncle Wole Shepeli still did not forget to educate Jojo, and still did not forget to encourage his students who were deeply trapped in pain and self-blame, and he did not forget to entrust his will and determination to Jojo. It was just a few duels, and only appeared in a few episodes, but the silver-haired brother Fukuda spread the charm of the character called Teacher to the extreme, and it can even be said to have reached an exaggerated degree. Although it is unknown how the subsequent plot of the comic JoJo will proceed, looking at the content that has been serialized so far, whether it is laying the background of the comic or showing the power system of the comic, Uncle Wole Shepeli is definitely one of the core of this part of the plot. But such a core character died in a battle that was not considered a key. What really surprised Mr. Huangmao Glasses was that it was just like this. Because Mr. Huangmao Glasses never thought that Mr. Silver-haired brother Fukuda could actually draw such a plot, and he also never thought that Mr. Silver-haired brother Fukuda would dare to draw like this. Even though Aho Mumanjai had done a similar plot when he fought a last-ditch battle, where the two protagonists fell in love and killed each other, that was done on a whim when the comic was about to end, encouraged by a good friend, and now, the silver-haired brother Fukuda has only been serializing for less than 3 months, and he dares to draw such a bold plot. Shocked, surprised, and then convinced, this is the change in the mood of the yellow-haired glasses man after reading the latest JoJo. It seems that we really underestimated Fukuda-san. The yellow-haired glasses man silently put down the comic, sighed for a long time, and lay on the chair as if he was exhausted, muttering to himself, although I told the highest before that our Hikaru no Go will not stop here, but... However, how should the image of Sai, the teacher in the comic, be portrayed? No, it should be said that how can the character of Sai be able to exert the greatest charm and become like Uncle Wole Shepeli to conquer other colleagues on the cartoonist side? Tisk, so, as a mortal, Mr. Yellow-haired Glasses, continue to be confused, hee. I was out before and had all kinds of things with Virus Girl after I came back, so I haven't updated it for a long time. I'm really sorry. A certain cat sincerely apologizes. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 544. So far, except for the teacher character created by the silver-haired brother Fukuda, which has been temporarily recognized by other cartoonists, the remaining few comics are still being serialized tepidly. To put it simply, the super brawl proposed by Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Nitsuma is still in full swing. How do you feel? The best. Although his face looked tired, he still couldn't conceal the excitement in his eyes behind his glasses. After seeing his good friend put down the comic plot he had completed, the yellow-haired glasses guy immediately asked with expectation. Road. How should I put it? Landai put down the comic manuscript with a tangled look on his face. Under the eager gaze of his good friend, after pondering for a moment, he still said his most direct words without any concealment. Speak out your feelings. Although the setting is very good, but I always feel an inexplicable sense of familiarity. The inexplicable sense of familiarity means. The man with yellow-haired glasses, who had originally been affirmed by his good friend, showed an unexpected look after hearing what his good friend said. He quickly shook his head and said, Isn't he the tallest person? Have you ever seen similar plots? No, this shouldn't be possible, right? It took me a long time to come up with these plots. Maybe I'm just overthinking, maybe, maybe, maybe it's just my illusion. No, 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 classmate Lande, no matter how you sound like this, it sounds like you are telling your good friend that this is not an illusion. Speaking of Chi-Ren, I heard you right just now. What you said, isn't it just the content of one sentence? Huh? Who told you that this is the content of one episode? Supreme, Mr. Huang Mao with glasses grabbed the notebook that recorded the plot of the comic from his good friend, shook his head and sighed helplessly. Although it's like Fukuda like you, I can create a great teacher character in the shortest time. I can also do this kind of thing, but the most important thing is that if we really choose that way, we must make our comic chess soul prepare to be cut in half. In other words, if you want to create a teacher character in a short period of time like Fukuda-kun, will it affect the subsequent development of soul of the game, causing the entire manga to collapse, or even be forced to be cut in half? Classmate Landai immediately understood the implication of the yellow-haired glasses gentleman. Should I say that he is indeed a good friend who has worked together for many years? Well, that's it. So I prefer to slowly lay out the plot, and then use the subsequent content of the comic to gradually increase Zoe's charm to the peak, and then. Looking at the look of my good friend listening attentively, the man with yellow-haired glasses paused abruptly for a moment, then whispered with a guilty conscience, I haven't thought about the next plot, I haven't thought about it yet. Hey, Akito, imagine the expression on Yoshida's face when he was teased in various ways by a certain second-grade manga artist on the grounds of gaining pleasure, and you may be able to understand what Landai's classmates are wearing at this moment. Ahem, let alone the unclear writing. If there are pictures, do you still need to use words to guide people to make up their minds? The best thing to say is, do you still remember the cartoon chapter of our Fusion-kun before? After brushing up the favorability of his good friends, Mr. Huang Mao and Glasses wisely chose to change the topic. Do you feel unwilling? Of course I'm not willing to give in. Landai looked at his good friend strangely, and after observing the serious look on his face, he continued, but even so, I believe in you, Chi-Ren, I believe you will be able to create a plot that is not part of JoJo. The best, you are really. The yellow-haired glasses man rubbed his nose and took a deep breath, then, with this unwillingness, let's complete the next plot. Leave it to me, Akito. Then the highest, what I want to tell you next is some details about this part of the plot. Halfway through the words, the yellow-haired glasses man seemed to suddenly think of something, and there was a strange look on his face, a little uncomfortable. He asked with too much certainty, to put it bluntly, I still feel the familiarity you mentioned before, what exactly is it? This. After hesitating for a moment, Landai said helplessly, actually, I just suddenly felt that the relationship between Xiao Guang and Xiao Liang you set in the comics, is very similar to the current one. We are with that guy Aiken. In the comic Soul of Go, Xiao Guang, who was guided by Zoe, went from a person who didn't even know Go to a super master. This kind of fighting ability is basically cheating, isn't it? Just like that guy Aiken. Classmate Landai, you are going to die. Have you forgotten the magical girl who died in a spoiler? Are you kidding? The expression on the yellow-haired glasses man's face became unnatural, and his smile became a little stiff. Why does Aiken have a plug-in? This is not scientific at all. Is there really anything in this world? Are there existences like Zoe? Ghosts, etc., they don't exist at all. Although the comic Soul of Chess was created, judging from the stammering tone of the yellow-haired glasses guy, can it be understood that the yellow-haired guy is afraid of ghosts? That's true, but after watching this part of the plot completed by Chi-Ren, I did have this feeling. Landai laughed at himself, denying that what he just proposed seemed unscientific, but in fact it was insight into the truth. Ever since Cheng's debut, he has proposed a comic points competition, serialized multiple comics at the same time, invited us all to dominate the weekly magazine for multi-person serialization, and even the bizarre showdown proposed this time, compared to other for a cartoonist who draws cartoons for fame and fortune, that Guy Cheng became a cartoonist and continues to serialize it, just for entertainment, right? This, what you said seems to make some sense, recalling the words and deeds of a certain middle-grade cartoonist in the past. A certain yellow man nodded decisively in agreement with his good friend's statement. We drew the comic manuscript seriously and worked hard to think about the comic plot, but that Guy Cheng has always maintained a playful attitude. However, until now, we have basically always been in the role of chasers. Classmate Lan Dai pointed at the notebook placed on the table by his good friend, with a helpless look on his face, and sighed melancholy, just like Ta Liang has been playing Go seriously since he was a child, but Xiao Guang has just helping Zhou Wei, with a nonchalant attitude all the time, made Xiao Liang want to work hard to catch up. Speaking of which, this depressed mood was exactly the same as Xiao Liang's mood after knowing Xiao Guang's thoughts. So Qi Ren, now do you understand what I mean by the inexplicable familiarity? I generally understand. The yellow-haired glasses man put on a sad face and complained unhappily, Tisk. Suddenly I feel inexplicably unhappy, I want to give that guy Aiken a good beating. Young man, you are so courageous. Lan Dai immediately moved back, looked at his good friend with sympathy, and encouraged him with gloating, Go, go, every year from now on, I will burn the single volume of Dragon Ball at your grave. Well, as for the finale of Conan, I guess I won't survive until then, right? Hey, Supreme, you guy. In response to his good friend's joke, the man with yellow hair and glasses shook his head with a wry smile. Let's talk about the next plot of Soul of Chess. So, the interaction between good friends, in addition to improving the favorability, can also enhance the combat effectiveness according to visual inspection. In the famous Dragon Ball, didn't Wukong and his friends grow up like this? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 545. Oh, that's it? Nyaizuma Ag decisively closed the new issue of the weekly Shonen Jump and said words that Yujiro beside him couldn't understand, so this is what Mr. Ajoki Yumha planned. Zhou Wei is indeed a great teacher. I said Nyaizuma-kun, did you find anything else? Even though he knew that Nyaizuma Ag would never tell him, Yujiro always couldn't help asking questions every time he encountered a similar situation. What should be praised? What about the tenacity of human obsessions, or should we complain that humans are indeed persistent creatures? Interest is the best teacher, you should know this, right? Seeing Yujiro still looking confused, Nyaizuma Ag helplessly spread his hands and sighed in a sympathetic tone, I've already given you everything. After such a level of reminder, I still didn't understand it. Yujiro-san is indeed an idiot. If it were the Phoenix Academy teacher, he would definitely say it right away. No, he would understand it without even saying it. By the way, please don't use your abnormal human thinking circuit to casually define normal people like us as idiots. Yujiro covered his forehead and protested helplessly to his new wife Ag like a weak dog. He sighed with resentment. Sure enough, no matter whether it is Shinzuma-kun or Yoshida-kun, as long as they have too much contact with the Phoenix Academy's Kumamoto teacher, their thinking methods and poisonous tongue skills will be greatly improved. Approaching the non-human level, Tisk, I suddenly want to teach that Shuyunibu cartoonist a lesson, if I can beat him. So, after Ajumumenha's good friend, another death-seeking human being appeared who declared that he wanted to conquer Takahashi Makoto. Just when Eiji Nyaizuma was following Makoto Takahashi's example and getting pleasure from his editor-in-chief, a certain middle-level cartoonist was also having a pleasure exchange with a certain editor-in-chief. To be precise, It is natural to feel happy he is a middle-class cartoonist, and the one who uses his various depressions to make this middle-class cartoonist happy is of course Yoshida, the tragedy editor of the weekly Shonen Jump. To put it simply, the situation is basically like this: Makoto Takahashi placed the weekly magazine in front of Yoshida, with an unclear smile on his face that Yoshida couldn't understand. Oh, by the way, this time Ajumumenha, those two good friends are really hard-working, they are really stimulated by the silver-haired guy. Wait a minute, Chang, don't talk yet, let me sort it out. Because the amount of information provided by Makoto Takahashi was too large, Yoshida was not able to fully understand it for a while. Of course, this is just an indication. Just a statement. The real reason. Huh? It's just this level of data, but you can't process my familiar cat in an instant. Makoto Takahashi looked at Yoshida in shock, and sighed in a very surprised tone. It's really surprising. Obviously, I have replaced the system for my beloved cat before. Both the data and information processing speed are comparable to Gate of Truth, and the calculation amount has reached the level of great powerful person. Unexpectedly you still can't communicate with us on the same channel. Alas. No matter how much you improve, you are still just an ant. It is obviously a very simple thing, but when it is explained by a middle-level cartoonist, all kinds of familiar or unfamiliar vocabulary will be mixed in, making things that can be explained clearly in a few sentences become quite complicated. It's complicated, ahem, no. It should become quite domineering, cool and tall. Therefore, if you want to obtain real information or intelligence, in addition to changing your thinking mode into a very high-level method like that of a middle-class cartoonist, you can only eliminate all irrelevant and disturbing content in a short period of time. So, now you understand why Yoshida can't understand Takahashi Makoto's words, right? Yoshida ignored Takahashi Makoto's venomous words, but picked up the weekly magazine on the table, slowly flipping through it, while thinking rapidly. Despite being complained and ridiculed by Takahashi Makoto, please don't underestimate Yoshida's ability as an editor. The content of this episode of Yachin Menjai's comic Go Soul is about the duel between Xiao Guang and Xiao Liang in Go. Regarding the content of this chapter that has been foreshadowed a long time ago, it is impossible to say that you are not interested in such a confrontation, whether as a reader or as an editor, but what Yoshida is really concerned about at this moment, the point is not this much anticipated showdown, but thinking about what Makoto Takahashi said when he read this chapter of the manga. Whether it's a duel between cartoonists or a farce, although Yoshida didn't get very detailed information from Makoto Takahashi, he did know some things. For example, the works of the duel between several cartoonists were created at the same time. Several new serials started in weekly magazines. For example, a lazy cartoonist did not intervene in this farce due to problems with his work. For another example, the key to victory or defeat this time is the character named Teacher in the cartoon role. Zhao Wei is indeed a great teacher. This was the first sentence Takahashi Makoto said after reading the comic Spirit of the Game, and it was also the only sentence that Yoshida could understand. Normally, as the teacher character in the comic Soul of the Chess, Zhou Wei naturally became the key role of Ajumumenha's combination in this duel. For Takahashi Makoto to make such an evaluation, he must have recognized the teacher role created by Ajumumenha's group. But in the content of this episode, no matter how Yoshida looks at it, he feels that Zhou Wei is not the core of the content of this episode. To put it simply, in the content of this episode, Zhou Wei not only fails to highlight a very important role, but it has become a supporting role in the true sense. Because the real content of this comic is Xiao Guang's transformation and growth. As foreshadowed in the previous comics, after the duel between Xiao Guang and Xiao Liang began, it was Zhou Wei who replaced Xiao Guang in the chess game. However, when the Go game progressed to the middle game, Xiao Guang, as a bystander, was infected by the atmosphere of the serious duel between Zhou Wei and Xiao Liang, and developed a feeling of being ignored, so he was unwilling to be excluded from the duel. Xiao Guang, who was outside, intervened in the duel beyond Zhou Wei's expectation with his half-expert level. Compared with Xiao Yang, who has systematically studied Go since he was a child and whose strength has reached the professional level, the result of Xiao Guang's level of becoming a monk halfway is actually very obvious. Xiao Guang was killed by Xiao Yang and was defeated. Don't admit defeat in the middle of the game. In this Go match, Xiao Guang changed from a silent spectator to a participant. Although Zhou Wei was very pleased with Xiao Guang's transformation and growth, he always regarded Xiao Guang as his own. Xiao Yang, who was an old enemy and writing friend, took Xiao Guang's behavior as a humiliation to himself. He insisted on finishing the game with tears, and then left the Go game angrily. After reading the expected and unexpected content of this episode, Yoshida, who has always been sharp-tongued, has to admit that the plot of a Jumumenha's episode is really good. But here lies the problem. Obviously, the content of this episode has basically nothing to do with the role of Sai as a teacher, but why does Takahashi Makoto give such an evaluation? Hey, Chen, why did you say? After spending nearly an hour and reading this chapter of The Soul of the Game several times, Yoshida finally couldn't help but speak, even though he was already prepared to be hit by someone. The two cartoonists were mentally prepared for all kinds of ridicule, but Yoshida felt that if he could not figure out this problem that troubled him so much, I am afraid that he would start the legendary insomnia mode in the next period of time. Tisk, my beloved cat, you are really the wisdom of a mortal. Looking at Yoshida's troubled expression, Takahashi Makoto already knew what Yoshida wanted to ask. Listen up now, let me give you another simple tip. Interest is the best teacher. Interest, the best teacher. Yoshida grimaced and looked at Makoto Takahashi with an unkind look. By the way, is this sentence really related to the content of this chapter in the comic Chess Soul? This is simply what you are talking about, Makoto Takahashi. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 546. Interest is the best teacher. When Eiji Nyaizuma explained to his editor-in-chief Yujiro, he also quoted the same words, so Yoshida really wronged Takahashi Makoto this time, because this is not the nonsense of a middle school cartoonist, but the fact is true. Google searched can. Compared to teachers who use cramming to let students master knowledge, teachers who make students interested in learning and guide students to learn on their own are real teachers in various senses. And Sai in the comic Hikaru no Go really did this. Recall the content of the first episode of the comic Hikaru no Go. Before meeting Sai, Xiao Guang took his classmates to the warehouse of his grandfather's house, wanting to secretly take out some antiques and sell them for pocket money. According to the standards of today's society, Xiao Guang is a naughty child, for sure. Let's take a look at the serialized content up to now. Xiao Guang began to study Go hard, and even signed up for the academy to catch up with Xiao Yang, preparing to move forward on the thorny road of becoming a professional Go player. Let an ignorant kid become a person with ideals and willing to work hard for it. This change can basically be regarded as a life-changing change. In addition to Xiao Guang's gradual growth, it is naturally inseparable from the silent guidance and education of Sai Wei. Sai Wei did not force Xiao Guang to play Go, nor did he deliberately tempt Xiao Guang to be interested in Go, nor did he tell Xiao Guang about his past glory or achievements to impress Xiao Guang. What Sai Wei did was very simple, just through a series of chess games with different people, let Xiao Guang feel his love for Go, let Xiao Guang realize his persistence in Go, and let Xiao Guang understand the direction of progress in confusion. Don't like playing Go? It doesn't matter, Xiao Guang, you just need to watch silently from the side. Don't feel the charm of Go? It doesn't matter, Xiao Guang, you just need to watch silently from the side. Have you not experienced the joys and sorrows between the winners and losers? It doesn't matter, Xiao Guang, you just need to watch silently from the side. Have you not found your way forward, and are confused about your life? It doesn't matter, Xiao Guang, you just need to watch silently from the side. One by one, the level of the duel is uneven, and the battles that determine the victory or defeat, Xiaoguang has grown up from a silent bystander, and gradually began to develop an interest in Go, and began to have goals that he wanted to pursue and surpass. Sai did not tell too many great truths, nor did he deliberately guide Xiaoguang on what he should do. Just as Xiaoguang silently watched Sai complete one Go duel after another, Sai was also silently paying attention to Xiaoguang's progress and growth. Is such Sai Wei a good teacher? No, in a sense, Sai is not a good teacher, because according to the theory of a good teacher produces a good student, under the education of Sai, a teacher who is basically a cheat, Xiaoguang should awaken the Aotian attribute in the creation story, and beat his good friends and various Go masters with titles at will. However, whether it is Takahashi Makoto or Nazuma Eiji, they are convinced by Sai, the teacher created by Yashiro Mumenjai. Although the two cartoonists have no communication, they recognize the greatness of Sai at the same time. What Sai taught Xiaoguang is not just Go, but also, the philosophy of life. Win or lose. It's not important. Compared with using any means to win, compared with being obsessed with the win or loss of the game, every time after completing a game, there is growth and understanding, that's enough. Win or lose. In fact, there is no need to care too much, because if the victory of the game is compared to the proud moments of life, then the so-called failure can completely promote the frustration and hardship of growth and maturity in life. The victory and defeat of Go are like the ups and downs of life. In simple terms, it is. Life is like chess, and chess is like life. Of course, compared with Takahashi Makoto and Nazuma Eiji, the other two participants of this big brawl, Shizukawa and the silver-haired brother Fukuda, only gradually felt the greatness of the teacher Sai after the comic Hikaru no Go continued to be serialized for a period of time. Even if they are members of the Fukuda group on the cartoonist side, there is indeed a certain gap in their strength. Tisk, it took a long time to lay the groundwork for this effect. Yashiro Mumenai really did a good job this time, although the tone was a little reluctant. As the comic Hikaru no Go continued to be serialized, the silver-haired brother Fukuda still admitted the charm of Sai, the teacher. Tisk, compared to laying out the plot step by step with careful consideration, sure enough, men should be more passionate. He said all kinds of unconvinced words, but in his heart he had already recognized the strength of Yachin Mumenjai. Isn't the silver-haired guy a typical tsundere? Sure enough, compared to the master. Jinghe River put down the weekly magazine, took a deep breath, picked up the brush and bowed his head again. I'm still far behind. The reason why Jinghe River said this is naturally because his understanding and cognition of the comic Hikaru no Go is completely derived from the nonsense of a middle school cartoonist. No, it should be an explanation. Although Takahashi Makoto used it as a toy to obtain pleasure, he was teased a lot, but Shizukawa-san, who believed in a certain middle school manga artist, misinterpreted Takahashi Makoto's evil taste of pleasure as a toy. After learning Master's special skills when educating disciples, he quickly solved the confusion in his heart and ignited the belief of asking Master to witness the martial arts of his disciples in this battle, and planned to defeat the two girls Aoi Ueno and Mayuri. With the help of his assistant, he returned to the battle of victory and defeat in great battle with high fighting spirit. Therefore, in order to express his gratitude to a certain middle school cartoonist for his education and guidance, Shizuka came to express his gratitude to Takahashi Makoto in person, and by the way asked his master Takahashi Makoto about Ajumu manga The Soul of the Game. After reading the review, I was successfully treated by a certain middle-level cartoonist with the eloquence of the great Celestial Dynasty brainwashing organization on the comic chess Soul. No, it should be a new understanding of the world. Zuoei will still disappear in the future. Makoto Takahashi put down the latest issue of the weekly magazine, with a strange smile on his face that his assistant, Uncle Tintin, couldn't understand, and said slowly as if talking to himself and confiding. Although the world lines are different, some fixed endings cannot be changed. All of these are indeed Steins Gate's choices. Speaking of Cheng. After hesitating for a moment, Uncle Ding Ding couldn't help but ask, I would like to ask you, where did you come to the conclusion that Zoe will disappear in the future? I know that in the current comic Chess Soul, Zoe is. Tisk, Tintin Ji-san, you are just immortal, how dare you try to spy on the world line regardless of life or death? Looking at Uncle Tintin, who had black lines on his face after being ridiculed, Takahashi Makoto shook his head with some pity. Human beings always make the same mistake, always thinking that with the wisdom of ants, they can predict the future. The so-called future is just a repeat of history, nothing more. Yes, that's it, haha. At this moment, Uncle Ding Ding really wanted to give himself a slap in the face for his bad mouth. After smiling awkwardly, Uncle Tintin decisively chose to continue his work as an assistant. As for a certain middle-grade cartoonist, just ignore it. I'm sorry to say that I recently replaced the optical fiber, so I couldn't access the internet. I finally got it fixed, but then the computer stopped working again. When I rolled up my sleeves and got ready to start coding seriously, all kinds of overtime work started again. When will these troubled days end? PS1, rewatching Soul of Chess, I feel that Psy is really powerful and great. PS2, recommend Yan'an Ting Feng, a big god-level sword and soul system, a novel about pirates mixed with the passion of death, and Purple Blue Pig, a big gourmet hunter. I don't know, readers. Do you like it? But a certain cat likes it very much. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 547. I'm so sorry, Cheng. I was caught in a traffic jam when I came here today, so I'm a little late. Because he arrived a little later than the agreed time, Yoshida immediately put himself in a very humble manner when he entered the door. While telling Takahashi Cheng the reason for his lateness, he also apologized with a respectful and humble attitude. The reason why Yoshida did this was not only because he felt a little guilty about being late, but also because he was more worried and afraid that a certain Chuyuni cartoonist would take advantage of the topic and complete the daily task of Joy Editor-in-Chief. Speaking of Cheng, you have to serialize 3 comics at the same time recently. In addition to One Punch Man in the weekly magazine, there are also a certain Scientific Railgun and White Rabbit Candy in the monthly magazine. This workload sounds exaggerated and terrifying. Cheng, are you really a man? Of course, Yoshida didn't think that he could just make a sincere apology, so in order to attract the attention of a certain Chuyuni cartoonist to the greatest extent, the editor-in-chief used his ability to change the topic that he has always been proud of. Although it is a good attitude to complete the comic manuscript seriously, as the editor-in-chief, I still think that the health of the cartoonist is the most important. After apologizing, he immediately changed the topic and portrayed himself as an editor-in-chief who cares about the cartoonist very much. Perhaps for cute cartoonists like Xiao Heidao who are usually oppressed, Yoshida's series of words and deeds can greatly improve his favorability, but don't forget that the editor-in-chief is facing the self-proclaimed crazy cartoonist Hao Wing Kyoma. Oh, my beloved cat, your attitude today is a bit abnormal. Takahashi Makoto narrowed his eyes, raised the corners of his mouth slightly, stared at Yoshida up and down for a while, and tapped the table rhythmically with his fingers, and smiled inexplicably. My beloved cat, as a pet toy, you actually evolved and comprehended the ability of caring for the master's physical and mental health that only housekeepers and servants can master without any help from any plug-ins. This really surprised me. Originally, I thought that whether it was a pet or a toy, the final outcome should be that it was completely broken beyond repair. Tisk, my beloved cat, your performance today refreshed my cognition. Just based on this, you can be proud enough. Yoshida said that now he has this fantasy of wanting to beat a certain Chuyuni cartoonist. How should he break it? Also, my cat, please don't try to hide the fact that you are late with silence. Looking at Yoshida, who fell into silence, a smile of satisfaction and relief appeared on his face from time to time. Even without using the master-level mind reading, Takahashi Makoto could guess what Yoshida was thinking. Also, even if you have fantasies like beat me up in your heart, please at least learn the most basic concealment ability. Although you are not the kind of idiot who will show your thoughts on your face, my cat, the red hatred and naked murderous intent on your body, even if there are 3 Pacific Oceans between me, I can clearly feel it. I apologize to you again for my lateness, the respected Majesty Fengguangai Yuan Kima. Compared with the previous apology, this apology is quite sincere, but, Yoshida, your moral integrity has fallen to the ground. Tisk. Have you finally realized the crux of the matter? No matter how you apologize to my beloved cat, I will, cough cough, although a certain Chuyunabaku cartoonist pretended to cover up and didn't finish the rest of the words, looking at Yoshida's face full of black lines, he must have guessed what Takahashi Makoto didn't finish just now. Is this the latest comic draft? Whether it was to change the subject or because of his duty, Yoshida wisely did not continue to tangle with Takahashi Makoto, but chose to pick up the neatly arranged comic drafts on the table and exclaimed in amazement, although I have long known that you, Chen, complete comic drafts very quickly, but when serializing 3 comics at the same time, there has never been a situation where you were not able to complete the comic draft in time. Ah, if only. Here American had half of your enthusiasm. That's not possible. Takahashi Makoto shook his head and denied Yoshida's unrealistic fantasy. After all, the origin of the little sea otter is laziness, and that's also the cuteness of the little sea otter. If the little sea otter suddenly becomes a passionate boy and starts to complete the comic draft with high morale, this scene is just a fantasy just like that. The peacekeeping is so chilling. This. Imagine the little sea otter wearing a white headscarf, drawing a comic with a fanatical face. Yoshida shuddered all over, and immediately shook his head quickly and repeatedly, with a helpless smile on his face. It seems to make people feel a little chilly. Ahaha. Yoshi, I also got a lot of pleasure from my cat today, and it's almost time to rest, so next. Takahashi Makoto said something that made Yoshida's mouth twitch, while standing in front of the desk, taking a deep breath, and slowly closing his eyes. Is it going to start again? Although he has witnessed it many times, Yoshida still can't help complaining until now. Aiken, this guy, is really, forget it, I'd better read the comics peacefully. Every time before Takahashi Makoto starts drawing a comic, he always says some embarrassing lines that are so ambiguous that they are extremely embarrassing, and Yoshida has developed the habit of quietly observing the comic after quietly complaining because he made a noise to disturb the comic for no reason. It must be said that although humans hate war, it is still war that drives human development and evolution. As expected, humans are such contradictory creatures, it is really pathetic. Hey. This is really, it can actually be done to this extent. Yoshida, who originally planned to quietly observe the comic, was frightened by the comic in his hand. No, the correct statement should be that Yoshida was shocked by the comic in this episode. Saitama teacher took Genos to a dungeon called House of Evolution, and the development of this plot did not exceed Yoshida's expectations. What really surprised Yoshida was the fighting scene in this comic. Although Genos, the protagonist, was defeated by the ultimate weapon of the House of Evolution, the Azura Rhinoceros Beetle, after a brief fight, however, it was this not-so-long fight that made Yoshida, the editor-in-chief who has observed many comics, so fascinated. When Genos moved at high speed, he used lines to help depict the moving route. As the footholds on the moving route, the flying gravel of different sizes gave the originally static comic a sense of layering, and even made Yoshida feel for a moment that Genos' speed is so fast and the huge power generated by the excessive speed. After images, clones, lines when moving, phantoms produced when punching quickly, these are all techniques used by comics to show the ultimate speed, but now they appear in the content of this episode. This is obviously just a common drawing in fighting scenes, but with the help of these techniques, Yoshida, as an observer, feels that both Genos and the weird-looking Azure rhinoceros beetle are fighting at a very fast speed. And in the next moment, the camera of the comic suddenly shifted to a huge fist, switching from the original high-speed duel scene to a static fist. Before Yoshida could marvel at the switch between movement and stillness, his eyes, driven by curiosity, involuntarily moved to the plot after the comic. A static close-up of the fist colliding with the cheek, and then Genos, who was focused by the Azure rhinoceros beetle, appeared too in an instant. It's not that there are two Genos, this is just to show how powerful the Azure rhinoceros beetle used to produce such a speed when knocking Genos away. So, the battle in the comic switched from stillness to extreme speed again. Awesome, awesome. I wonder if Yoshida is marveling at the fighting scene in this comic? Or are you still admiring the drawing skills of a certain middle school cartoonist? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 548. Although the content of this episode of the comic One Punch Man far exceeded Yoshida's expectations, whether it was amazement or emotion, Yoshida, after a brief absence of consciousness, still did not forget to continue to fulfill his duties as the editor-in-chief and carefully observe the next content of the comic. Even though there are many things I want to say to Makoto Takahashi, even though there are many questions I want to ask a certain Chuyuni cartoonist, but now the first task is naturally to read the comic manuscript in my hand as the editor-in-chief. And looking up at Makoto Takahashi, who was carefully completing the comic manuscript, Yoshida felt that if he made a sound or did anything to disturb a certain Chuyuni cartoonist at this time, he would definitely get a strange experience like that life cannot bear. The painting skills shown in this episode really surprised me, but this does not mean that the content of this episode is really flawless. At least in Yoshida's opinion, the plot of this episode is too normal compared to the shocking painting style, right? Especially when he saw that after Genos was knocked away by the Azure rhinoceros beetle in the comics, Saitama took over the battle and fought on behalf of his disciple. Yoshida's brows began to gather worry. After using all means to fight a gorgeous battle, Genos still couldn't defeat the Azure rhinoceros beetle, but was beaten half-crippled. But according to the previous serialization of the comic One Punch Man, when Genos, as a disciple, couldn't defeat the opponent, then the next plot development should be the turn of Saitama to show his power and kill the Azure rhinoceros beetle with one punch. Although he hasn't read the rest of the comics, Yoshida is sure that the next plot development of this comic should be like this. This is not that Yoshida suddenly awakened and realized some innate magical power of great prophecy or seeing the future, but as long as the readers who have been following the serialization of the comic One Punch Man for a while, they can probably guess the next plot development of this comic, right? But in fact, the reason why Yoshida did not continue to look through the comics was because he was the editor-in-chief of a certain middle school manga artist at the moment, and suddenly realized the biggest problem of the comic One Punch Man. No, it should be the biggest flaw. First, the monsters appeared and began to wreak havoc or kill, then the famous or unknown heroes appeared, showing their personalities through the plots in the comics while fighting with the monsters. Then either the monsters crushed the heroes head-on with their powerful strength, or the monsters defeated the heroes who could have defeated them with all kinds of despicable means. Finally, the scene developed to an extremely dangerous moment, and the bald Saitama teacher would appear at the critical moment, and solve the monsters that troubled the heroes with one punch, turning the tide, and completing the important task of saving mankind or protecting the world. If only part of the plot of the comic One Punch Man is like this, Yoshida may not think there is anything wrong with it. After all, this routine of pretending to be a pig and eating a tiger still looks very exciting, but if the whole comic is like this, Yoshida thinks that this comic will soon make readers lose interest. After all, for most readers, the reason why comics are interesting is largely due to readers' expectations and speculations about unknown plots. If readers can already guess how the comic will develop next, or speculate on the direction of the comic plot, then what else can attract people to this comic? It's rare that Cheng has shown his unprecedented superb painting skills in this comic, but unfortunately. Yoshida sighed silently, looked up at Takahashi Cheng, who had already completed the so-called ritual and entered the manga artist mode, and said helplessly in his heart, "It seems that I need to have a good talk with Cheng about this issue later. Oh, I feel it. I feel it. This breath that makes my soul addicted." Takahashi Cheng, who had just finished the comic draft seriously, looked up at Yoshida and suddenly then he let out an unusually strange laugh. "Is the pleasure event really about to happen? Oh my beloved cat, I am looking forward to how you will make me feel pleasure next. Ha 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 ha. Tisk. Why not just not tell this guy Cheng anything and let this comic continue to be serialized until its popularity drops to a level that is unbearable to watch and then it is directly cut off?" Yoshida, the editor who just gathered his mind, thought so after curling his lips in dissatisfaction. Eyes full of murderous intent, and a soul full of humiliation and unwillingness, my beloved cat, I can now be sure that today is definitely a good day for a great harvest of pleasure. The rampage of words did not stop, but became more and more excessive, but in the same way, Takahashi Makoto did not stop the brush in his hand, and continued to quickly complete the comic draft. Tisk. If I could beat him, if I could beat him. At this time, all Yoshida can do is just mutter to himself, right? As for following the traditional approach of just smile at this time, Yoshida is really worried whether he can leave Takahashi Makoto's house safely today. Oh, my beloved cat, if you have the will to kill, you should also be prepared to be killed. So, in response to Yoshida's mumbling, Takahashi Makoto raised his head and looked at Yoshida, with a dangerous smile on his face. "Have you written your suicide note? By the way, I just saw this, right? The content after that is..." Whether he is shameless or a coward, Yoshida wisely did not continue the dangerous topic with Takahashi Makoto. On the one hand, Yoshida did not want to disturb the work of a certain Chuyunibu cartoonist, on the other hand, cough cough, everyone understands. After quietly reading the remaining comics in his hand, and waiting for Makoto Takahashi to finish the comics that should be completed today, he talked with a middle school cartoonist about the problems and defects of the comic One Punch Man. Finally, after figuring out Makoto Takahashi's ideas, he found a way to solve the problems and defects of the comic One Punch Man. Originally, Yoshida planned this way, which was correct. This. Unfortunately, Yoshida's previous fantasy plan was broken by himself. And the reason why Yoshida made such an exclamation was naturally because he saw a very incredible plot in this episode of the comic One Punch Man. That's why Mr. Saitama is bald. No, it should be the secret of Mr. Saitama's transformation from an ordinary office worker to a Superman who is so powerful that any monster can be killed with one punch. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 549. If the comic One Punch Man continues to develop along this route, it will be easy for readers to give up reading because they lose interest. Therefore, Yoshida was silently thinking just now, hoping to persuade Takahashi Makoto to let a certain middle-class cartoonist do it later. In the serialization, some plot characters' memory killing is used to slow down the development of the plot. Especially regarding the plot about Mr. Saitama becoming stronger, Yoshida originally thought that Makoto Takahashi would release it bit by bit after a year of serialization, so he was still thinking about how to persuade Makoto Takahashi later and move forward a little earlier. Release part of the content to delay the plot of the comic One Punch Man so that readers will not quickly lose interest in the comic, but what Yoshida never expected was that a certain middle-class cartoonist actually made something he had never done before. A choice I've thought about. Not only did the reason why Saitama-sensei became stronger be announced in the content of this episode, but he also did not even have the slightest intention of delaying time. The information that could have delayed the content of about 3 episodes was included in the plot of this episode. All disclosed without reservation. Chen, please stop finishing the manga manuscript for a while. This is the second time Yoshida has stopped reading the manga manuscript today, although he knows that interrupting Takahashi Makoto's work will lead to misfortune. Don't underestimate it. Yoshida has awakened the soul of responsible editor. I think I need to talk to you now about the follow-up development of the comic One Punch Man. I refuse. Makoto Takahashi simply and decisively rejected Yoshida's idea of communication. He didn't even raise his head and continued to draw the manga manuscript on the table. Hey, Chen, now is not the time to be willful. Although Takahashi Makoto usually has this attitude, Yoshida has long been used to it, but today only, Yoshida is inexplicably angry about Takahashi Makoto's attitude at this moment. If this continues, the comic One Punch Man is very likely to. Does a mere cat belonging to me dare to talk about comics with me and the Great Phoenix Academy? You don't know how to live or die. Makoto Takahashi finally stopped painting this time, with a look on his face. With a disdainful smile, want to talk about the comic One Punch Man? Yes, as long as you can show your persistence and love for comics and pass the test of love and persistence after that, I promise to have a serious communication with you. What do you want me to do, Chen? Don't waste time, just tell me. Yoshida, you can actually understand the implication of Takahashi Makoto's words in an instant. By the way, you seem to have boosted your IQ a lot recently, right? But Editor-in-Chief, have you ever heard of the 8-character mantra of Xian does not save fate, Krypton does not change fate? Since you can understand my familiar cat, it means that IQ is barely qualified. But Makoto Takahashi put down the brush and snapped his fingers. You can't further deduce my plan, which means that my familiar cat you still lack experience. Before Takahashi Makoto finished speaking, Yoshida saw Sadaharu holding a huge cardboard box in his teeth and dragging it in front of him with great effort. Are these? My familiar cat, I know what you are worried about, and I also know what you want to say to me. Don't underestimate the manga artist Shoinkuma, who is a mad demon. Makoto Takahashi seemed very satisfied. Yoshida had a shocked look on his face at this moment. He pointed at the cardboard box placed in front of Yoshida and said slowly, these are the follow-up manga manuscripts of the comic One Punch Man. The content is about fighting the dark matter pirates. Hey, you probably don't understand what I'm telling you, right? If I put it in another way that you can understand, what you have in front of you is the entire manga draft up to the 48th chapter. 48 chapters? There are so many. Looking at the manga manuscript stuffed into a box, Yoshida did not look through it anxiously, but looked at Makoto Takahashi with an unkind expression, and spoke in a slightly serious tone. Asked, I'm talking about Aiken. First of all, can you please explain how you found the time to complete this box of comic manuscripts when you were serializing several comics at the same time? Although he was asking Makoto Takahashi, Yoshida vaguely guessed that the entire box of manga manuscripts in front of him was basically completed by a middle-level cartoonist who took advantage of his break time other than completing the manga manuscript after completing the serialization, so it is not so much asking Makoto Takahashi to find out the root cause. It would be better to say that Yoshida is complaining about Makoto Takahashi not having a good rest. This is a secret that cannot be told. Makoto Takahashi picked up the brush again, pulled out a new piece of paper, and began to draw lines while saying slowly, do you want to know the answer to everything? Do you want to understand the art? How does super speed work? Do you want to know the exciting content of the comic One Punch Man? I entrusted all the truth to it. After passing the test of love and persistence, my belonging cat, it's up to you to find the answer. Are all the answers I want, all in it, After spending many years with a certain middle school cartoonist, Yoshida naturally understood the implication of Makoto Takahashi's words. He slowly opened the carton and took out a stack of comic manuscripts, also, that is to say, regardless of the subsequent development of the comic, or the reason for completing this number of comic manuscripts in a short period of time, we can all find it in it. This comic manuscript is. Oh, my beloved cat, your expression has changed. Although he just pretended to be, I'm going to start drawing comics seriously. In fact, Takahashi Makoto was just using this to cover up the change in his facial expression after spying on Yoshida, and the behavior of getting pleasure. By the way, my beloved cat, your trial has also begun. Trial, yes. Yoshida's expression was quite wonderful at the moment. After coming to his senses, the corners of his mouth twitched, and he gritted his teeth and said, "This is really an incredible trial. No matter how the plot will develop next, you can insist on reading the comics to the end. This is the test of persistence. No matter how the style of painting is amazing or full of magic, you still don't give up your love for comics. This is the test of love. My beloved cat, awaken your persistent soul as the editor-in-chief, recall your deep love for comics, and then, do your best to pass this trial called love and persistence." Although Takahashi Makoto's tone of "I'm doing this for your own good" is very inspiring, but can you please not show that fox-like smile of "I'm doing this on purpose for pleasure"? But, are these also considered comics? Since he asked this question, it means that Yoshida has decided to listen to Makoto Takahashi's well-intentioned advice and start observing the comics in the cardboard box, but Yoshida seems to be a little entangled at this moment. Speaking of my beloved cat, are you underestimating the comic One Punch Man original version? Makoto Takahashi suddenly sighed with some regret. Using ordinary ingredients to make happy dishes, using simple sword moves to break all martial arts in the world, and using childish and clumsy painting styles to draw comics that make people's blood burn, this is the legendary state of returning to nature, do you understand? Speaking of this, there is no connection at all, right? Yoshida spread his hands helplessly. Sure enough, the way of thinking of a certain middle school cartoonist is still as difficult to understand as always. Then let's change to a version of my favorite cat that you are interested in. Makoto Takahashi pondered for a moment and sighed. My favorite cat, the problem you are worried about. After you finish reading the original version, you will find the answer. The last straw that broke the camel's back appeared. I know. The original version of the comic One Punch Man. Although Yoshida was persuaded by Makoto Takahashi in his heart, he was still not honest enough. While flipping through the comic manuscript in his hand, he gritted his teeth and said viciously, I will read it. I will read it all carefully. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 550. Before starting to complete the trial of love and persistence, no, it should be the original version of the observation comic One Punch Man, Yoshida felt that he should first read the manga chapter that he had not read before. If there are problems with the follow-up of the comic One Punch Man, that is only a matter of the future. Even if a second-rate cartoonist designs any weird plot development in the future, it is only a matter that needs to be considered in the future, at least Yoshida feels. The most important thing now is to read the manga chapter that will be serialized in the next issue of the weekly Shounen Jump. Of course, the reason why Yoshida made such a choice was definitely not because he wanted to delay the trial, nor was it out of expectations for the sharp manga manuscript of that episode. Yoshida just felt that he had always been the responsible editor who has a beginning and an end. Well, there is nothing wrong with that. In the follow-up comic draft of One Punch Man, although the battle between Genos and Ashura is very gorgeous and looks very intense, in fact the strength gap between the two sides is too obvious. Not to mention that Genos's killing move was easily neutralized by Ashura One-Horned Fairy. Ashura One-Horned Fairy just threw a punch and knocked Genos away. This difference in strength seems a bit too exaggerated, right? Seeing teacher Saitama catching Genos who was knocked away by a Jura unicorn in the comics, Yoshida couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth, and raised his head to Gao Chiao Cheng asked, "Speaking of Cheng, Genos from the Justice Camp was defeated by a Jura unicorn from the villain camp, although I know this is to pave the way for the appearance of bald Saitama next, but are you sure there is nothing wrong with painting like this?" "Alas, my belonging cat, it seems that I still overestimated your reasoning ability and memory." Makoto Takahashi helplessly let out a sigh that made Yoshida want to run away. "My beloved cat, you really did it before. Have you carefully observed this comic? You don't even have the most basic information. Do you dare to claim to be the editor-in-chief of the Weekly Shonen Jump? Do you dare to claim to have graduated from that legend? The Second World Academy city that has trained countless spies and assassins? Tisk, my beloved cat, you have refreshed my understanding of human shamelessness. Now we're talking about comics, don't talk about boring stuff with me." Once he asks Makoto Takahashi about the plot of the comics, he will attract all kinds of weird complaints and ridicules, although Yoshida has long known that this will happen. "I thought I was mentally prepared for this kind of thing, but being ridiculed and ridiculed like this still made a certain editor quite unhappy." "Cheng, are you saying that the gap in strength was mentioned in the previous series?" "Of course, if he chooses to engage in a verbal confrontation with a middle-class cartoonist, Yoshida said it would be better if he keeps changing the subject." It's not that Yoshida doesn't have the confidence to fight with Makoto Takahashi, he just thinks it's pointless to waste time on such things. By the way, the more important reason is that if the only thing that determines the outcome of the battle is mouth release, then it still doesn't matter. The key is that a certain middle-level manga artist's taijutsu makes Yoshida feel like he is a scumbag with only a combat power of 5 in front of Makoto Takahashi. Close your eyes and meditate, in a state of selflessness, concentrate and hold your breath, open the door to the palace of thought, and after paying a sufficient price, you can bring back what you need from behind the door. Speaking of my beloved cat, regarding the method of opening the thinking palace door, I remember that I have completely left it to you, right? Looking at Yoshida's confused look, Takahashi Makoto shook his head helplessly and sighed inexplicably. "That's it? Forgetting very important things easily, as expected, no matter how much we evolve and develop, humans will always be just a despicable species." Although the tone and content of Makoto Takahashi's words can be considered confusing to the point of being incommunicable, the key hints contained in them can well explain the questions he raised. Of course, sometimes, for the sake of to be able to figure out what the prompt was, Yoshida had to unlock the third level of the gene lock to simulate the thinking mode of a middle-class cartoonist. Content that has been serialized before? Ignoring Takahashi Makoto's cynicism, nor complaining about the sentiments of a certain middle-class manga artist, Yoshida recalled what Takahashi Makoto said before. Without any hesitation, he immediately put down the manga manuscript in his hand, stood up and walked to the bookshelf. Looking through the previous issues of the Weekly Shonen Jump, it didn't take much time for Yoshida to re-observe the comic plot that he was already familiar with, but even though Yoshida looked at it very carefully this time, he couldn't find any clues. By the way, in the plots of the previously serialized comics, was there really any mention of the gap in strength? After Yoshida put down the latest issue of the Weekly Shonen Jump, he looked at Makoto Takahashi with suspicion. So a certain editor is now suspicious, thinking that this is a cartoonist who is deliberately inducing him. As for the reason, Yoshida can be sure that this is definitely due to the bad taste of a middle-class cartoonist. "Tisk, you have lost your mind and can't even make the most basic deductions." Takahashi Makoto showed a look of regret on his face, and said slowly with a disappointed tone, "Use the ability you used to catch the little sea otter back then and make a good deduction. Back then, my cat was the editor of the weekly magazine, comparable to a drum washing machine. Now, alas, my cat is old, can it still make a living? I'm really sorry that my deduction ability has declined." And Cheng, the last part of your comment was a spit and mockery of Lianpo, right? he didn't use the previous 3-part spit. As expected, Yoshida is also an old editor-in-chief. When Geno-sama appeared before, he first had a fierce fight with Mosquito Girl, and then Mosquito Girl evolved by sucking blood, greatly improving her strength. If it weren't for Saitama-sensei's rescue, Geno-sama would have been killed. Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida, who was about to lose control, shook his head helplessly, and began to kindly explain, and didn't it mention in the previous episode of One Punch Man that Ashura Rhinoceros Beetle is the strongest strategic weapon in the House of Evolution, and the mere Mosquito Girl is not its opponent at all? Is that right? In other words, Genos, who can't even beat Mosquito Girl, certainly can't fight Ashura Rhinoceros Beetle, right? Takahashi Makoto has explained to this extent. If Yoshida still doesn't understand now, he can probably resign and commit seppuku. Seeing that Makoto Takahashi was about to continue speaking, Yoshida interrupted without hesitation. Okay, Makoto. Now I understand, you don't need to say the rest. Let me finish reading this episode first. Ignoring Makoto Takahashi's various complaints, Yoshida picked up the comic manuscript again and entered the careful observation mode. You know, Yoshida is quite looking forward to the reason why Saitama Teacher has become stronger. When Saitama Teacher replaced his disciple Genos and prepared to confront Ashura Rhinoceros Beetle head-on, Ashura Rhinoceros Beetle, who was able to easily defeat Genos before and was known as never retreating, immediately distanced himself from Saitama Teacher at the fastest speed at the moment of attack. Because Ashura Rhinoceros Beetle's intuition told it that it would die the moment it attacked Saitama Teacher. You guy, why are you so powerful? Finally, Ashura Rhinoceros Beetle asked the question that the comic character and Yoshida, the observer, wanted to know most. 100 push UPS, 100 sit UPS, 100. Saitama didn't hide anything and answered seriously. But, after watching Saitama in the comics say this exercise method with a passionate face, Yoshida felt bad. What's the matter, my cat, do you have any questions? Suddenly feeling like he was being watched, Takahashi Makoto looked up and saw Yoshida looking at him speechlessly, so he asked with his hands crossed and his chin resting, do you want me to erase your name recorded in the death book? I didn't materialize the death eraser, so, unfortunately, it's too late. No. I'm just a little confused, that's all. Yoshida stared at Takahashi Makoto for a long time, his mouth twitched a little, and he asked uncertainly, is it true that training like Saitama in the comics can really turn an ordinary person into a Superman? I feel that this setting in the comics is really... Humph, my cat, this world is not as simple as you think. Takahashi Makoto leaned against the chair with a solemn look on his face. On the surface, the environment in which humans live is very peaceful, but in fact, the scientific side and the magic side have long been incompatible. Okay. Stop. I already know, why ask this kind of question to this middle school cartoonist? Yoshida listened to Takahashi Makoto's nonsense and suddenly felt that he was very stupid and naive, so, a responsible editor decisively chose to change the subject. But, I seem to have heard of this method of becoming stronger that Saitama-sensei talked about in the comics. I think I've heard of it somewhere before. I guess it's an illusion. Is it an illusion? My beloved cat, it seems that your memory is not declining, but someone has modified your memory. No, there may be other possibilities. Looking at Yoshida trying to recall, Takahashi Makoto pondered for a moment, and then a look of realization appeared on his face. Could it be that the aftermath of that battle has affected the world line? The battle? Huh? I remember it, from doubt to painful recollection, from painful recollection to sudden realization, and then from sudden realization to depression and entanglement. Yoshida actually mastered the facial expression switching technique, and he seemed to be quite familiar with it. It's really surprising that he can achieve this level as just an editor in charge. Saitama-sensei's method of becoming stronger, isn't it what you said back then, Makoto? Tisk, have you remembered it? Takahashi Makoto spat in disappointment, muttering, it seems that the world line has not changed. Once Yoshida was very curious, how could a cartoonist who stayed at home all day have such a strong fighting power? At that time, Makoto Takahashi's answer was exactly the training method of Saitama Sensei in this episode of the comic, but Yoshida didn't believe it at all. But now, it's a lie, isn't it? This kind of training can really make people stronger, even to the level of Saitama teacher. Yoshida once again doubted his understanding of his life and the world. Of course, Takahashi Makoto nodded seriously, and at the same time kindly reminded Yoshida, but my cat, you have to think about it first, because the side effect of this kind of training is that it will make people bald. Then why aren't you bald yet, Takahashi Makoto? Of course, Yoshida would never dare to say such a thing, at most it was just a malicious imagination, that's all. Recently, a certain cat was dragged to write various report summaries and wrote them all day and night. A certain cat wanted to refuse, but the other party said, it's just writing some report summaries, aren't you writing novels? Him. Whose report summary is the same as a novel? I want to vomit every day because I am tired and disgusted. Alas, anyway, there has been no update recently. It's the fault of a certain cat. Dear readers, I'm sorry. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 551. Chapter 551. So, don't underestimate the bald attribute. Damn it. Every reader who likes comics or novels, perhaps, must have imagined that he would bring himself into the comics or novels, just like those memorable characters in the comics or novels, and perform an extraordinary performance in that extraordinary world. Therefore, he learned the cultivation methods of the characters in the comics or novels, and imagined that he could also stand out from the ordinary like the characters in the novels or comics, get rid of the shackles of ordinary, and become a special existence. Although he knew that this was impossible, as a human being on the reader's side, he couldn't help but fantasize and look forward to it. When I wake up in the morning, I will imagine that I suddenly awaken to the superpowers that only exist in the fantasy world overnight. When I wash my face in front of the mirror, I will deliberately observe whether my eyes have turned into evil king's true eyes. On the way to school or work, I will long to peek into the dimensional gate from another world and become the summoned beast /U0026 familiar /U0026 lover of a proud lady in another world. When I eat and take a nap, I will look up at the distant sky and look forward to the appearance of space shock that is impossible in scientific common sense. On the way home from school and get off work, I will fantasize about picking up a notebook that can control human life and death and become the god of the new world. When I look up at the sky at night, I hope that a minotaur totem will fall from the sky. Ahem, no, it is an angel that reads Entertainment Universal and writes Strategy Universal. However, the reality is like the right hand of a boy who risks his life to pick up girls, shattering all unreasonable and unrealistic fantasies. When you wake up every morning, you don't face yourself who has awakened superpowers, but ordinary daily life comes again. When you wash in front of the mirror, you will find that your eyes have not become evil king's true eyes, but have a little more bloodshot because you don't get enough rest. On the way to work and school, the pedestrians who pass by are just those who are struggling to make a living and rushing on the road, not the arrogant assistants after changing the world line. There is no call from another world and no chance to save the world. There is only a life that is as ordinary as boiled water. Whether it is a comic or a novel, the reason for its appearance may be that ordinary humans living in an ordinary world yearn for an extraordinary life in an extraordinary world, and it is also the expectation of ordinary humans living in an ordinary world for an extraordinary life in an extraordinary world, right? Although Yoshida wants to make complaints about Saitama's speechless exercise method, Such a casual setting is really a real man, it cannot be denied that it is indeed an outstanding setting for the entire One Punch Man comic. Through the previous serialization, the bald image of Saitama teacher who can defeated any enemy with just one punch has left a deep impression on readers, and the curiosity about how did Saitama teacher become so powerful has also spread among readers, so when the secret of Saitama teacher's strengthening part of the story was serialized, it instantly brought a storm to the readers. Saitama teacher has no extraordinary talents, no special blood, and has not unlocked the shackles such as gene lock because of any unexpected events. Like many readers, he is just an ordinary human being. However, it is such an ordinary office worker who, through physical exercise that is not considered intense for many people, persisted for 3 years with the momentum of not sparing baldness, and became a Superman who can solve all powerful opponents with one punch. The contrast between the two is like the difference between heaven and earth, which naturally left a very deep impression on readers. Saitama teacher's training is not very difficult. After reading this chapter, many readers can't help but want to try it. Because although you may not necessarily become an invincible bald man like Saitama teacher, but, being able to get rid of your ordinary self, this alone is worth it for readers who observe comics to try. You may not remember how Saitama teacher solved Vaccine Man with one punch, or how Saitama teacher slapped Mosquito Girl to death with one slap, or even how Saitama teacher easily eliminated Azure Rhinoceros Beetle, but as long as readers have read the comic One Punch Man, they will never forget Saitama teacher's almost joking way of becoming stronger. It is precisely because of this that the performance of the comic One Punch Man in the next few chapters is quite stable, and there are even several times that it almost rushed to the first place. Of course, for Yoshida, the editor-in-chief of a certain middle school cartoonist, this result, in addition to the joy brought at the beginning, is more of a long-term torment. Think about it, after the results were counted several times, the comic One Punch Man always ranks second with a slight disadvantage. If Yoshida had not been trained by a certain middle school cartoonist for many years, she would have definitely become a complete witch in the transformation from hope to despair. However, what makes Yoshida happy is that the wonderful fighting style shown by Makoto Takahashi in the comic One Punch Man before has appeared in the comic again with the appearance of Sonic the Hedgehog. This also makes Yoshida realize that the painting skills of the battle scene in the previous episode are not just a flash of inspiration or a flash in the pen of Makoto Takahashi, but a real strength. Today is another day to collect manga manuscripts, but the editor-in-chief Yoshida, who is about to arrive at Takahashi Makoto's house, has a helpless smile on his face at this moment. As for the reason, it is naturally because of the news published in this monthly issue. Got it? The process of collecting manga manuscripts was as smooth as ever. After all, Makoto Takahashi is not an unscrupulous cartoonist like Little Sea Otter who runs away if he doesn't pay close attention. Originally, Yoshida planned to publish the monthly manga after receiving the manga manuscripts. A certain message came to Makoto Takahashi, but after seeing the latest comic draft of One Punch Man, a certain editor felt it was necessary to postpone his plan. Just one punch will smash the meteorite falling from the universe to pieces, although it can be inferred from the previous serialization that the bald Saitama teacher is quite powerful, but for this kind of super expansion in the comics, Yoshida he still clearly showed his surprise. Although this setting looks quite touching, but isn't it a bit exaggerated, Cheng? Exaggeration? Tisk, my beloved cat, you underestimate the attribute of baldness. While Makoto Takahashi shook his head in denial, he also did not forget to complain in words that Yoshida could not understand. The only cartoonist who can give the protagonist a bald head setting, I'm afraid you are the only one, Cheng. Yoshida rolled his eyes and looked at Makoto Takahashi expressionlessly. I can say that he is indeed the cartoonist Phoenix Institute. Is it serious? Let me tell you, Cheng, I think the comic One Punch Man missed the first place several times, probably because the bald image of the male protagonist is too. Hey, my familiar cat, you underestimate the bald setting. Looking at Yoshida's helpless look, Takahashi Makoto nodded to himself and continued, I see, I understand. I understand. Although existences like you, my subordinate cat, cannot be noticed or felt, the evolution and development of human beings have indeed never stopped since ancient times. Chen, you don't mean to say that the symbol of human evolution is bald, right? Yoshida sneered with unknown meaning, and at the same time, the vicious tongue to destroy enemies mode also entered the activated state. If this is really the case, it would be a really sad thing. On the road of evolution and development, there are countless ways and methods for human beings to choose. However, as time goes by, some choices that go astray or in the wrong direction will cause human beings to be unable to adapt to the current living environment. Were eliminated, but there are some choices that can undergo the baptism and tempering of time and become the necessary means for human beings to survive. Makoto Takahashi did not pay attention to Yoshida's cynicism, but continued to talk about what he had just said. Finished words. A simple summary is that human development and evolution are fundamentally about wisdom and power. Well, Chen, I have something to tell you. Looking at Makoto Takahashi, who began to talk about the evolution and development of human beings, Yoshida suddenly felt as if he had opened Pandora's box. In ancient times, when knowledge was severely lacking, human beings had to choose to improve their own strength because of the limitations of their own era, or in order to survive in a cruel environment, and chose this development model. According to today's concepts, he said that he chose the so-called power. But it's too late. Yoshida is completely unable to stop Takahashi Makoto. With the rapid development of science and technology, human knowledge and insights have begun to accumulate, and they have also gradually realized that the strength of the individual is far less than the whole, and the power of the individual is far less than the whole, but to unite the individuals, to exert the overall strength requires the ability of overall coordination, as well as all aspects of knowledge and intelligence, and this is what is called wisdom today. By the way, after a brief moment of silence, Yoshida asked again and again in order to change the subject, does this have anything to do with the baldness attribute you mentioned before, Chen? Of course it does matter, appeared. The special skill of a certain middle-class cartoonist who talks nonsense seriously appears. My beloved cat, think about it carefully. The current strength displayed by teacher Saitama can definitely be used as a representative of power, and the other bald man, the Mangaka who claims to be extremely smart since he was a child, can also be as so the representative of Ji. Well, both Saitama and Mangaka are bald. Regarding this fact, Yoshida feels that Takahashi Makoto is not wrong. So my companion is a cat. Now do you still dare to underestimate baldness, a special attribute that represents human development and evolution? One Punch Man is not the first comic to use a bald man as the protagonist. Don't forget Gaji Gaji. Well, although his age was inadvertently exposed, what a certain cat wanted to say was, ahem, dear readers, Happy Youth Day. A middle school cartoonist. Author, Mao Do Sde Mao. Chapter 552. Although during this period of time Shizukawa put most of his thoughts on the weekly Super Smash Bros. Proposed by Makoto Takahashi and Eiji Arizuma, this does not mean that Shizukawa has completely given up on serializing it in the monthly magazine. Cut. The comic genre serialized in the monthly magazine, the previously serialized plot is close to the end of the chapter, and this also means that in the next plot, the assassination group Night Raid is about to meet Ace. The hunters led by Da fought fiercely. When the comic genre serialized the death of Glasses Girl Hill, it had already caused quite a reaction among readers. But now, when the battle between the opposing sides in the comic begins, the plot is far more tragic. Far beyond the reader's imagination. Regardless of the assassination group Night Raid or Hunter, the hostile parties are constantly losing strength in battle after battle. No matter what they have experienced in the past, No matter what yearnings or expectations they have for the future, the two opposing sides follow their own wills, carry their own beliefs, and fight endlessly. Every battle will make the readers sigh, and after every battle, the readers will always feel depressed, and the closer the plot is to the end, the more tragic the battles will be. Ever since the brutal fight between the assassination group Night Raid and Hunter in the comic genre began, many readers have written letters and called the monthly editorial department, hoping that the author of this comic, Mr. Shizukawa, can make his my favorite characters live a little longer in the comics, especially the protagonist in the comics who is in the assassination group Night Raid camp, but there are many readers who support him. However, the crazy cartoonist Jing He did not pay attention to the opinions of readers, but continued to draw according to the plot he had set before, and continued to unswervingly continue to kill the characters in the comic, especially the ones that were released before. In one monthly issue, cartoonist Jing He inhumanely killed Ma Yin, the arrogant twin-tailed girl who risked her life to rescue the male protagonist Tajmi and confessed her feelings for the first time. According to the settings of many comics and novels, generally speaking, a female character who has an emotional scene with a male protagonist cannot be regarded as a heroine, but she can still be regarded as a member of the heroine candidate camp, and according to the protagonist, according to the rule don't die before the end of the plot, the arrogant twin-tailed Ma Yin should not die in battle. After all, in the plot of Saving Private Tajmi, Ma Yin just fell into Tajmi's arms, and the plot did not actually mention the death of this arrogant twin-tail. It is precisely because of this suspenseful setting that many readers have expectations, hoping that Ma Yin will only be seriously injured rather than really dead, but what readers never expected is that the crazy cartoonist Jing River, in the latest issue of the monthly magazine, Ma Yin received the lunch directly. When giving hope to humans, we should not forget to give corresponding despair. In the comic style, this is the so-called truth, but in real life, this may be what humans call cruelty. Then, the readers were furious. The overwhelming number of letters and the endless phone calls made the originally relatively quiet editorial side of the monthly magazine become noisy. This also made the editors on the editorial side of the monthly magazine once again recall the days when a certain second-grade cartoonist once dominated fear. So after a certain middle-class cartoonist, another cartoonist who can use disaster invitation appeared. Perhaps this scenario has been anticipated, or perhaps the new editor-in-chief of the monthly magazine, Sasaki-sama, has already prepared a countermeasure, or perhaps this was originally a plan to target a certain middle-class cartoonist. In short, as the monthly editor-in-chief, Mr. Master Sasaki, in order to deal with such an incident, as early as the release of this monthly magazine, asked the manga artist Shizukawa who caused all this to include a reading explanation in the section dedicated to the manga artist's message. Writing a message for troubled water diverts to the east. Whether comics are sadistic or full of tragedy, as a cartoonist, I just want to draw a world of my own. Not affected by the outside world, strengthen your own will, and completely release your inner emotions in comics. Then I declare here, I am a disciple of the manga artist Hohoin Kuma-sensei. In the era of information explosion, don't underestimate the speed of information exchange on the reader's side. Therefore, Jing He's declaration in the monthly magazine was quickly analyzed by various powerful readers. The cartoonist Jing He River once serialized a dark comic in a weekly magazine. The cartoonist Jing He River was once a disciple of the cartoonist Phoenix Institute Jujhen. The reason why the cartoonist Jing He River serialized the comic genre this time is the purpose of such a heartbreaking plot is to imitate his master's cartoonist Phoenix Inferno, or to pay tribute to his master's comics that were serialized. The first two pieces of information may not have much impact, but the following ones. This information successfully made the resentful readers point the finger at Makoto Takahashi. Then, those hateful comics and plots that were serialized by a certain middle school cartoonist, and the dark history that made readers feel depressed, were once again exposed by powerful readers through Shizukawa classmates' declaration. Come out. From the death of L in the manga DN, to the tear-jerking Zero Requiem in the manga Rebellion, to the death of Uncle Hughes in the manga Full Metal Alchemist, the plots that once made readers feel endless resentment in the manga that a certain Chuyuni manga artist once serialized, finally broke out with the message left by Shizukawa in the monthly magazine this time. Of course, for the manga Clannad that was once serialized in the monthly magazine and regarded as a life textbook by many readers, there are also many plots that make readers feel resentful. Therefore, among the readers who denounced the manga artist Howin Kyoma, there are also many fans of the manga Clannad. Luckily Takahashi Makoto and Nyaizuma Eiji did a good job of keeping it secret. At least the identity of the manga artist named Makoto Shinkai was not exposed. Otherwise, with the depressing plot of the previous manga Madoka Madoka, even if a certain Chuyuni manga artist stayed at home quietly to draw comics, readers would definitely use the human wave tactics to attack and kill him. So, looking at the declaration of Shizukawa in the monthly magazine that could be called diverting trouble to others, Takahashi Makoto looked at Yoshida with a puzzled look and asked a little depressed, "Is all this my fault? This is simply an unprovoked disaster, although I really want to say that, it's not wrong, but..." Yoshida spread his hands helplessly, with a gloating smile on his face, "But in a sense, Shizukawa-kun is not wrong to say so." "Huh? My beloved cat, what are you talking about?" Takahashi Makoto slapped the table unhappily and roared at Yoshida, "It's not my fault, but the world, right? Hey, Aiken, this matter has nothing to do with the world of Saionji, don't blame others." Seeing Takahashi Makoto depressed, Yoshida was a little excited. Maybe this is what a certain Chuyunibi cartoonist often said, "Joy. You did this yourself, didn't you? Don't forget that Shizuka-kun was your assistant. It was because of your influence that the cartoonist Shizukawa drew such a tragic plot. It's natural for readers who observe comics to have such thoughts, right? Tisk, from the root, it's not me who's wrong, it should be Tokyo me, right?" Takahashi Makoto complained in a slightly sad tone, and immediately looked at Yoshida with contempt. "Speaking of my beloved cat, I had already had a vague guess before, and now I finally found decisive evidence. Guys like you can't find a marriage partner or something, it's because you play too many 18+ games, right? Don't try to explain it. I tell you, who would believe that a guy who even knows World Stock said he had never played that game? By the way, Chen, are you qualified to say this to me? Don't forget who created the plots of those games, damn it." Yoshida was hit on the sore spot by a certain Chuyunibaku cartoonist, and he was furious. "So what?" Seeing Yoshida's excited expression at the moment, Takahashi Makoto expressed that he was quite delighted. "Don't forget that I have captured the witch, and now I have begun to train the next Demon King and Witch. Oh my cat, don't show that expression of wanting to eat people. I will not blame or even punish you for what you said just now. After all, being able to observe the howling of a single stray dog at close range is also a very delightful thing in a sense." Yoshida was silent with a black face. What should I do if I really want to kill someone at this moment? But then again, if it weren't for Ryako's actions this time, I would still be a little embarrassed, or I couldn't make up my mind. Takahashi Makoto ignored Yoshida's puzzled look, but showed a familiar and horrified smile of a responsible editor. "But after seeing that the readers are so enthusiastic and kind supporting the crazy manga artist Howin Kyoma, I think if I don't give some special benefits to the readers, it would be too ungrateful. My beloved cat, you think so too? Right? I have a bad feeling, although he is not a certain goddess's faithful 5, Yoshida at this moment really has such a feeling. And now this time, is very suitable to release that God's development plot. Tisk, I wonder what kind of mood Jingzonghaji-san will feel after seeing it." As if thinking of something exciting, Takahashi Makoto showed a happy smile on his face. "All this is indeed the choice of Steins Gate. Ha 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 ha."